Good morning and welcome to Sifting Through the Rubble. Today's topic is Repetitio Mater Memoriae. Repetition is the mother of memory. Should have it shared here. Last week, we talked about Decendo Discimus. By teaching, we learn. And we segued at the end pretty well, I think, into this concept of repetitio mater memoriae, or as it's often also said in Latin, if Latin is said often, repetitio mater studiorum. So repetitio mater memoriae is repetition is the mother of memory. Repetitio mater studiorum. Let me see if I can throw up a whiteboard. Yeah, so the two, repetitio mater memoriae is repetition is the mother of memory. And then the other one, repetitio mater studiorum, is repetition is the mother of studies. And I think an important thing about studiorum and studies, I don't know if I've said it in this group, I've said it in some other places. Student, study, they come from the Latin verb studio, studere. And the Latin verb studio means to be eager. So the noun studium, which means pursuit, eager pursuit, or cognate, right, study, really is not as academic or bland as we think the word can be. And the same thing with student, it's one who is eager. And so then repetition is the mother of eager pursuits, of things worth pursuing. And I think both of those phrases in tandem, repetition being the mother of memory, the thing that produces memories, and then repetition being the mother of eager pursuits, that the more we do something or say something, the more it actually ingrains us towards pursuing something eagerly. These are very significant statements. And they're significant because a lot of yellow journalism has been done against memory, especially memorizing, right? You'll hear doing something by rote referred to in a sort of negative sense. Well, that's fine, but they're just doing it by rote. And I think repetition gets a bad rap as a result of that. There are lots of ways to repeat something that could be by rote, but you've actually learned the thing by virtue of repeating it over and over and over again. Whether this be practicing your handwriting, right? Good and bad handwriting have been remembered by doing it over and over and over again. If you constantly and form your letters the right way, that repetition has produced a memory of good handwriting. If you constantly form your letters the wrong way, that repetition has created bad handwriting. It's the mother of a different kind of memory. Latin, of course, is an easy one because we do a lot of chants for the ends of nouns, right? I, arum, is, as, is. And you could do those in any number of ways. You could say them without any feeling, or you could make them fun when you say them. But by saying them over and over and over again, when it comes time to apply them, you have the tool memorized in your head, something to correspond with. And this is one of the important things about repetition, because it does produce memories. Now, we need memory because we forget an awful lot. our minds are leaky vessels. It's, some people have a hard enough time remembering what happened yesterday, and some people have a hard time remembering what happened last week, or maybe 10 minutes ago. But the more we can train our memories and work on our memories, the stronger the memory becomes, especially when we're speaking about our children, because their memories are stronger at the beginning. There's a study, I don't remember what it was, but I remember that it's at 4, memory peaks. And after age 4, how you use your memory determines the rate of decline in terms of memory. When it comes to repetition being the mother of memory, it's important to remember that what you are remembering, especially as we're talking about a classical Lutheran education, the things we are remembering are true, are good and beautiful. And so that repetition that produces that memory is a means to possessing truth. It is a means to possessing goodness. It is a means to possessing beauty for the student in body and soul. And so although sometimes the repetition can seem vain, it's actually for a greater purpose when you're going through math facts or timeline dates or vocab words or endings or phonograms or music notes, whatever you are working on remembering, on memorizing, the catechism and our memory work, like we just did in chapel here at school, that it is a means to receiving the content. And since the content is good and true and beautiful, that's what we strive to incline our children to here at school and in our homes, then the memorization is not just a tool, even though it is, but it's actually a means towards receiving the good thing. It's not just some, oh, well, you just make them do that. It actually has a greater benefit than knowledge or the good grade or the thing like that. Think about how many things we do over and over and over again. There's a great, I don't know if I have the quote here from Chesterton. No, it's in here though. Let me get rid of the whiteboard. And I'm going to share my pedagogical principles with everybody. The pedagogical principle for repetition is the mother of learning. Can everybody see this quote, perhaps God is strong enough? Yes, no? Is it sharing the Word document? Yeah? Okay. So this quote from G.K. Chesterton is from Orthodoxy, which is a really good book. G.K. Chesterton is late 19th, early 20th century writer, lay theologian in England. And he writes in Orthodoxy, perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. And he does this in a big long paragraph where he talks about how children love to read the same book over and over again, right? Especially little kids. You'll read the one book to them and they'll say again and again and again. And the children, there's no lack of joy in reading Brown Bear, what do you see, right, for the 15th time, or Good Night Moon, or whatever it is, right? The monotony is actually joyous for the children. And so then Chesterton says, perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It's possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. That this over and over again, which to us as adults, right, we invent the mythology of the great and powerful Friday because it ends our monotonous work week, right? Instead, we don't exult in the monotony and in the repetition. We don't find joy there. We find joy in ceasing it. But Chesterton makes the point that perhaps God, who does things over and over and over and over again, like children, may exult in this. They rejoice in the over and over. And so a lot of the bad rap that repetition gets, and memorization gets, I think has to do with how we treat it, how we handle it. Because we all know that doing something over and over and over again does produce good results in terms of practicing, right? Practice makes perfect. Many of the things that we know by heart, that we know really well, we got there by drilling it, by doing the process over and over again, or by writing the thing down over and over again. That's how I memorized all the languages I've worked on in any class. I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and I did it again, and then I didn't have to do it anymore because it was stuck in my head. There are lots of different ways to do it, lots of ways to remember. And although sometimes, especially now, technology is used as a panacea to remembering, right? Oh, I can just look it up. I don't need to know this. Or I can have it all accessible on my phone. What's the point of learning it? There's a quote, I don't have it with me. Well, it's actually, I can see it. Have I referenced Technopoly in this session before? Anybody? Technopoly by Neil Postman. I'm going to get up and walk to my books. This book, Technopoly by Neil Postman, 1994, is really, really prescient. Neil Postman's not an Old Testament prophet, but he's pretty close to being one. The way he talks about technology, even in the 90s, is absolutely astonishing. How he talks about humanity and technology being technological users, and then ruling with technology, and then being ruled by technology. And he sees that in the mid-90s, and certainly, I think if we look around, Zoom can be any of those three things. We're using it now for our benefit, but there are so many ways in which technology rules. And at the beginning of the book, he quotes from Plato. And this relates to memory, especially as you'll hear, because of the relationship of technology and memory. So in Plato's Phaedrus, his dialogue Phaedrus, Socrates tells the story from ancient Egypt. And I'm just going to read the whole thing for you, and then we can either talk about it or, but it's really, really good. Thamus inquired, this is the king of Egypt. Thamus inquired into the use of each of the gifts of the god Thuth, who invented writing. And Thuth went through them, expressing approval or disapproval, according as he judged Thuth's claim to be well or ill-founded. It would take too long to go through all that Thamus is reported to have said, like for and against each of Thuth's inventions. But when it came to writing, the god Thuth declared, "Here is an accomplishment, my lord the king, which will improve both the wisdom and the memory of the Egyptians. I've discovered a sure receipt for memory and wisdom." To this, Thamus replied, "Thuth, my paragon of inventors, the discoverer of an art, is not the best judge of the good or harm which will accrue to those who practice it. So it is in this. You, who are the father of writing, have out of fondness for your offspring attributed to it quite the opposite of its real function. Those who acquire writing will cease to exercise their memory and will become forgetful. They will rely on writing to bring things to their remembrance by external signs instead of by their own internal resources. What you have discovered is not a receipt for is a receipt for recollection, not for memory. As for wisdom, your pupils will have the reputation of it without the reality. They will receive a quantity of information without proper instruction, and as a consequence, be thought very knowledgeable when they are, for the most part, quite ignorant. And because they are filled with the conceit of wisdom instead of real wisdom, they'll be a burden to society. I think it's absolutely fascinating that this is written in the 300s BC. about writing, which we don't really think of as technology. Does anybody think about writing as technology on a daily basis? Right, like, right? We think of the thing we're using right now as technology. We don't think of writing our name down as technology. But the warning is not never write anything down. The warning is, what does technology have to do with our memory? Does it get in the way of actually internalizing things and making them a part of us? And this repetition is a way in which the information that we repeat and memorize becomes a part of us, becomes internalized, to be used as a tool, but also to inform our thoughts and our conversation and how we receive things when we're listening. I love that. I still need to memorize it. That quote from Plato, to me, is a timeless wake-up call to any form of technology. Is it actually doing what it says it's doing, or is it only helping, or is it causing us to diminish? Because think about what you know and how you remember. Is it getting better or is it getting worse? There's another book. I don't have it on my shelf. It's I've lent it out. It's called The Shallows by Nicholas Carr. What the internet is doing to our brains. It's a really interesting book. I recommend both of Nicholas Carr's books, C-A-R-R. The Glass Cage is about computers, and the Shallows is about the internet. They're from like 2010 and 2012. They're really, really interesting studies. He does a lot of research and citing and of different studies, as well as of observing different things. If you're interested in that topic, I would totally recommend both. The Shallows by Nicholas Carr and the Glass Cage by Nicholas Carr. Computers and the internet have done a lot. Well, and Postman will argue, since there's so much information, how much information are we asked to process on a daily basis, right? Nonetheless, memorize. There's so much information out there that we're overloaded with the information. And that's not actually the most beneficial for our brains. And memorizing certain things is actually better for forming how we think, instead of just having this flood of stuff. I think it was in the Renaissance that the last person who knew everything existed. That there was someone who could have said they knew. Now, of course, it wasn't everything, because not everything was discovered, and it isn't even yet. But all the facts that were known at the time, one person could know in the Renaissance. Now it's, of course, it was impossible then, but now it's actually impossible, because there are so many things you can look up that no one knows. Memory is not just for memorizing. Memory is for the good and true and beautiful life. Memory is for the benefit of serving the neighbor. Memory is also, it has very many theological roots. If you read through the Old Testament, God is very keen on remembering and wants Israel to remember what he has done. Especially when it comes to the Exodus, you'll see a lot of verbs like remember that God brought you out of Egypt. And so this idea of memory can be tied into all facets of what we do here at school, but certainly to the Christian life and the life of a lifelong learner. Remembering internalizes material. Remembering allows one to use the material and engage with the material. Remembering is really something useful because of what all those memories do. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left. Any thoughts or reflections or questions or comments towards this idea of repetition as mother of memory? Yes, Charlie.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can understand like that earlier quote. Okay, writing, is more for recollection. And let's face it, I can't remember everything, you know. I can't even remember where I parked my car sometimes. But at least I know which resource or reference book I can go to get the facts I need. So there's got to be some basic memory, core memory, if you will, and knowing how to go to these encyclopedias or what have you. Like right now, I'm writing what's called a white paper. Well, I'm not going to write the whole thing. I'm just going to say, hey, you need to do this, go to that, go here, go there, check this, check that, but I'm not going to remember everything. So there's a certain amount to be said for recollection.
Sure. No, I think you're right there. But then there's the question, right? If you want to ask, what do you know? If recollection is enough to answer that question.
Yeah.
And so if all you can do is recall it, do you know it yet?
Well, yeah. You can spout facts. That doesn't mean you know anything.
Mm-hmm. And so I think the nice thing about repetition as mother of memory really is going for that deeper knowledge piece.
Right.
That by repeating in various ways, right? Singing, saying it, writing it. There's so many different ways that you can fuel the memory. We've talked in here, I think once or twice, about commonplace books and the commonplace method. My grandparents had a pastor who memorized his sermon by looking at the windows of the sanctuary. He would go into the sanctuary to practice his sermon, and each stained glass window, he would put parts of his sermon into the window every week. So as he would never look down because he had memorized the sermon window by window and had located that stuff there. So there are lots of different methods, but the point being that all of these methods have a high purpose, and that knowledge, which is sort of internally mingled in the person, is the goal, that these things that you learn become a part of you. Certainly, recollection can be useful, but think of the lessons that you've learned that you still remember, right? They become a part of you.
Yep.
Good. Other things, I'm going to write down these Carr books in the chat.
Hi, Pastor Paul. Can you hear me okay this week?
I can. That's perfect.
Good. I have adjusted my microphone. Thank you again for the presentation. And I have a question where I don't have even a suggested solution, so I'm just going to explain a little bit. I like what you said about the handwriting and other memory practices, how the practice imprints the discipline into you and the eagerness into you. So my question is about how children, especially young children, don't have that discipline, or what if they've not developed yet the eagerness? It's like a chicken or the egg, where if they're not eager or not disciplined, if they're practicing wrong and developing the wrong memories, do you have any suggestions on how to work with that type of child?
Well, Luther said that one of the most important things about a teacher is that the teacher be engaging and exciting. I think when eagerness is not shown in a student, the teacher is almost required to show the eagerness and model it for the student to learn. Because eagerness generally is infectious. If you're excited about something, oftentimes that excitement will spread to the people that you're sharing your excitement with. Think even not about learning, but think about when you're in the room when a joke happens, right? If you get told the joke later, it's not funny anymore. But if you were there, you remember the infectious sort of nature of the joke. So I think that's one thing. One thing is the the onus on the teacher to be eager for his teaching and for his subject, right? If a lot of people probably hate math because their math teacher hated math too. and it was just going through I actually came to love math by teaching math. I couldn't stand math as a student, but I like it now. And I know that modeling liking math helped my students enjoy their time in math, even if it wasn't their real favorite subject. So that's one thing. And when it comes to, like, say, the bad habit, it's really modeling the good habit. There's a lot of modeling that I think we've lost in general education, but that classical education retains. Sometimes people think that dictation is not a good thing, but dictation, modeling, saying, I'm going to say this sentence, let's have you write it down, that ingrains in a person a way of speaking. Think about the common, would everybody agree that people who read a lot have good vocabularies usually? Right? Is that, we can use it as a truism? How do they get the vocabulary? The repetition of reading over and over and over again, all these different books, right? By reading and repeating reading, their memories have been imprinted by great words. And so the more we can inculcate positive habits, lots of reading, reading good things, lots of writing of good things, those habits can produce in a person, now listen to me, I sound like I'm supporting Aristotle. Those habits can produce a virtue of a sort. Right? It's not salvific virtue, but it does produce in you the ability to do the thing, especially if we're talking about handwriting or reading and vocabulary, because it just happens. It just happens that these words are available to you because you have taken them in and repeated the action of taking them in. Does that answer?
It is excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
You're welcome. Other questions? Reflections?
Yeah, speaking of handwriting, I keep reading on the internet, cursive has gone away. Yeah, I presume at the Memorial they do in the early years.
We do cursive. Starts in 2nd grade. In fact, I gave a tour yesterday to a potential, I think, kindergartner next year family, and mom used to teach 3rd grade.
Uh-huh.
We walked past the 3rd grade classroom, and right outside since parents aren't in here, we have to take pictures and post them, Allison. The 3rd graders just wrote fables, and Mrs. Downey posted the 3 top fables on the board outside. Used it as part of their contest. If you do the best work, I will put your work outside. Next one, everybody gets to do. But 2 of them, one of them is typed. 2 of them are handwritten in cursive by boys.
Yeah.
And they're excellent. And this parent was like, "You do cursive in 3rd grade?" I said, "We do it in 2nd." She's like, "This is outstanding."
Yeah.
So, and cursive, there are lots of studies that show that cursive is great for your brain. And I love cursive. I often find that, and even lots of people find that cursive is more useful than print when people have issues with writing or retaining and working through letters. But yeah, it's disappeared in America, unfortunately, although many school districts I know are trying to bring it back. Other languages use cursive and got it from us. I used to use Russian as an example of a language that has a beautiful cursive. And then I learned that the Russians got their beautiful cursive from America. The old form of cursive called Spencerian cursive, which is the kind of cursive that, like, the Constitution's written in, like the big loopy pretty cursive of the 19th century. The Russians saw it and then adapted their alphabet to a cursive, and they still teach cursive in their schools today. In fact, if you take Russian in college in America, the first thing you learn after the alphabet is how to write it in cursive. Not in block letters. That's for typing.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, we have cursive as a part of our school, and we intend to keep it that way because of the good effects it has on learning, on retaining information, and the fact that it's also beautiful. And then you could actually read the letters your grandparents wrote and things of that nature, and the Constitution and old documents.
Mrs. Crumweedy had told me that it's also great for dyslexic students because they're forced to write your B. You can't mess up the B. You can't do a backwards B when you're doing cursive, B's and D's. So she said it's actually very helpful for dyslexic students, which I found very interesting since my daughter is dyslexic.
Yeah, no, there's so many good benefits to cursive. And it's good to be in a place that does it. Faith Plano, most of our classical schools do it. A lot of more traditional schools do it. And it's not just for tradition's sake, but because it actually internalizes something and helps our students grasp things. All right. Well, that was exciting. It's already 10 o'clock. I can't believe it. They're the
Time
half hour
flies.
when you're having a great time.
Yeah.
I enjoy all of you who come in to Sifting Through the Rubble. It's really been a nice thing for a Friday. I hope that you've all enjoyed it. Next week, let me see if I can find my schedule. I think next week is The Best Teacher is a Good Book, right? Yeah. The Best Teacher is a Good Book. So we will be talking about the great books, which really are for adults and older students, but we'll also be talking about great literature and talking about why it's important, what is a good book, and then why it's important to read good books. What do good books do? And I think it actually flows pretty well off of the how we write produces good or bad habits. What we read produces good or bad when we're reading too. So next week is The Best Teacher is a Good Book, Optimus Magister Bonus Liber. Should be a fun thing to work through, especially as we get towards objective and subjective distinctions. But that's the way it always goes. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. We'll post this up on YouTube, and have a great rest of your Friday.